Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 46, and today, in the deep dive, we are focusing on the book The Generals of Pakistan, written by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
And our mission today is very specific. We're going to distill the core arguments from this source material, looking at what the author calls the civil-military tech axis.
Right, an axis. It's a powerful term. And we're going to be looking at how these three, very distinct centers of power GHQ in Rawalpindi, the government in Islamabad, and maybe surprisingly, Silicon Valley have, according to the source, fused together.
Exactly, into a single synchronized strategic framework. It's a framework for the 21st century, and it really challenges the old ways of thinking about state power.
Okay, let's just jump right in, because the central idea here, the thesis, it completely reframes how you should look at state survival, at strategic decision-making in the modern age.
It does.
We're not talking about, traditional geopolitics or just another chapter in political history. What's being described here is a total systemic re-architecture. It's a system designed, really, to manage what are perceived as existential threats.
And for anyone listening who might not be as familiar with the regional specifics, it's important to clarify.
Yes.
When the source says Rawalpindi, or GHQ, that's basically shorthand. It refers to the military's general headquarters, the institutional and strategic command structure of the armed forces.
That context is absolutely vital. And the initial hook, the thing that really grabs you in this source material, is it's a potent one. It says that GHQ Rawalpindi has moved far beyond being just a traditional military HQ.
It's not just about troop movements anymore.
Not at all. The source describes it now as and I'm quoting here, a comprehensive strategic brain for the entire nation.
Which is a huge conceptual leap.
Right.
A strategic brain. That implies it's doing the thinking for more than just the military.
Precisely. And this shift is so crucial because it shows this profound realization at the highest levels that modern conflict, modern competition has fundamentally changed.
The whole game's different.
The whole game. The source is very clear on this. It argues that warfare today isn't fought just with tanks and jets. It's fought with data flows, it's fought with financial stability, and it's fought with the speed of innovation.
The ability to innovate faster than your rivals.
Yes. And so GHQ, adapting to include these non-traditional areas, that reflects a strategic response, a national level response to what we now call hybrid threats.
So if you're looking to understand, quickly but thoroughly, how a state sees and manages its biggest threats in this digital, financially fragile age, this source is essential.
Absolutely. We need to get into the why of it all. How did this convergence happen? What are the specific tech levers being pulled? And, what does this actually mean for governance itself? Especially when, as the source acknowledges, critics see this as massive overreach.
And that's the tension at the heart of it, isn't it? Is this pragmatic necessity, or is it strategic overreach? The source tackles that head-on.
A perfect framing. So let's start to the foundation with the structural alignment of these power centers. We'll begin with Section 1, the integration of power nodes, starting with GHQ and its changing role, and then how it plugs into the civilian machinery in Islamabad.
The source makes a really strong claim right out of the gate, and it immediately pushes us past the old models. It says, GHQ is now conceptualized as a strategic brain that links four critical interdependent pillars.
Okay, what are they?
Security, economy, technology, and diplomacy. And the key word there is interdependent. They're no longer seen as separate things managed by siloed government departments.
Let's unpack that, because if you only look at GHQ through the traditional lens of defense, barracks, logistics, border security, you completely miss the point the analysis is making.
You miss the entire picture.
The source is saying its mandate has expanded. It's not just aware of economic and tech strategy, it actively integrates them into its central command functions.
So the implication is that a national debt crisis, or say, the collapse of your national digital payment system,
is just as much a threat to sovereignty as a foreign army crossing your border.
Exactly. It's a profound redefinition of national security.
The fascinating thing here is what that implies for decision-making. I mean, when a state starts to see its economic viability, its ability to get foreign investment, for example, and its technological edge as direct extensions of national security, then military involvement in those non-traditional areas becomes, in this framework, not just possible, but necessary.
So protecting the economy becomes as vital a mission as protecting the borders.
Especially when that economic stability is threatened. And those threats can come from anywhere now. Internal fragility, external financial warfare. It creates a model where all elements of state power have to be aligned. They can't afford to be competing with each other. Okay, I have to push back a little here because for a lot of people listening, that sounds inherently inefficient. Why would the source suggest a military structure is the right one to handle something as specialized as, say, fintech regulation? You have civilian experts for that.
That is an excellent question. And it goes right to the core of the source's justification for this shift.
Yeah.
It's not about replacing civilian expertise.
Okay.
The source seems to argue that while civilian institutions have that deep technical knowledge, they often lack two critical things. First, a singular centralized capacity for rapid long-term strategic planning.
And second,
The institutional resilience to push through that plan without getting bogged down by political polarization or, just bureaucratic inertia.
so in this view, GHQ provides the continuity,
Sure.
the continuity, the centralization, and the operational speed. The kind of disciplined execution needed for crisis management that can't wait for the next election cycle. The military doesn't replace the expertise. The source suggests it provides the disciplined framework to execute the strategy developed with that expertise. So the old hard line between military defense and civilian economic planning, it basically dissolves. It has to, especially when you realize a cyber attack can do more economic damage in an hour than a border skirmish might cause in a week.
That conceptual pivot is the foundation of the entire axis. It's what justifies the whole coordination mechanism.
And if Rawalpindi is the strategic brain, the command center with the grand strategy, then what is Islamabad's role in this model?
Islamabad is defined as the functional interface.
The interface.
This is where the strategic concept gets translated into actual, actionable governance,
Yeah.
into policy, into law.
Right. So Islamabad is the node of civilian authority. You've got the parliament, the ministries, the regulatory bodies like the central bank, the courts. This is the legitimate legal machinery of the state.
And the challenge is always connecting the speed and strategic vision of that military brain to the often slower, more deliberate legal mechanisms of the civilian state.
So how does that connection happen?
Through what the source calls the functional interface. It's a system that emerged over time between these civilian bodies and the military leadership. And it's not just a theory. The source points to very specific, high-level areas of coordination that show how it works.
And looking at those areas really shows you where traditional civilian turf intersects with this new expanded definition of national survival.
Absolutely. We're talking about deep coordination in something like economic policy formulation.
What does that mean in practice?
It means integrating strategic security concerns, like managing sovereign debt or ensuring food and energy security, right into the long-term financial planning being done by the finance ministries. It means every major economic decision gets a strategic risk assessment.
Okay, that makes sense. Then you have the more obvious ones.
Right, the explicit national security committees, which is the formal meeting point.
Mm.
And then the operational reality of counterterror and internal stability operations, which by their very nature require coordination between military intelligence and civilian law enforcement.
Using things like Nader's database and financial tracking tools.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting, and it ties right back to our core concept of the axis.
Go on.
The source also specifically lists crisis governance management, and this is critical, digital regulation and fintech oversight.
Those last two are pure 21st century strategic issues.
Completely. Crisis governance implies having a pre-agreed mechanism for rapid, unified decision-making when the normal, slow bureaucracy just won't cut it.
Sure.
Think of a massive earthquake, a sudden financial meltdown, a pandemic.
Situations that demand an immediate unified response.
Exactly. And the second one, digital regulation and fintech oversight. That's the link. That's the Islamabad civilian interface connecting directly to the tech battlefield we talked about.
Who governs the data? Who regulates digital currency?
Precisely.
Yeah.
This is where the strategic direction from the brain, from GHQ, is executed through the legal and regulatory channels in Islamabad. The civilian side provides the legitimacy and the enforcement power.
Now, the source is very careful about how it describes this coordination, and I think this is really important for you, the listener, to grasp.
Yes, the wording is specific.
It says this interface is characterized as coordination during national stress, and it explicitly states it is not a takeover of civilian institutions.
That distinction is vital. It frames the whole thing not as a power grab for its own sake, but as a mechanism that gets triggered by perceived existential necessity.
So we have to dig into that term, national stress. What does the source mean by that? What specific conditions flip the switch on this high-level synchronized coordination?
Well, based on the source's whole framework linking security, economy, and tech national stress, seems to cover several interlocking crises. The most obvious one is acute economic instability.
Like a sovereign debt crisis or your currency going into freefall.
Exactly. High-stress scenarios that need immediate centralized action across the finance ministry, the central bank, and regulators to stop a systemic collapse.
But it's not just about the economy.
No, of course not. The traditional stressors are still there. Protracted border security threats, counterinsurgency operations. But the newer, maybe more pervasive stress comes from political crises that threaten to paralyze the government.
Creating a policy vacuum where nothing gets done.
Right. And then the most modern stressor of all, a massive digital attack. An attack that threatens critical national infrastructure, the power grid, the banking system, telecommunications. When civilian systems are just struggling to function under the weight of all these crises at once, the coordinated interface is activated as a survival mechanism.
So for you listening, understanding this coordination helps you see the logic behind the decision-making process in a crisis. It explains why a major economic plan or a new digital policy can suddenly appear and be executed with such speed across different parts of the government.
It's the axis in action, treating a digital or financial threat with the same urgency as a conventional military one.
Which brings us to the next logical question. If they're coordinating on digital regulation, what are these new digital assets that are so important they require a complete retooling of the state?
And that leads us straight into Section 2, technology as the new strategic asset.
The argument from the source here is simple, but it's absolute. The 21st century battlefield has decisively shifted to technology.
There's no ambiguity. The old math of military power counting soldiers, counting tanks, it's obsolete if you don't have a corresponding technological edge.
If you don't control the flow of data, you don't control your own destiny.
And this isn't presented as a choice. It's an existential mandate. The source states it very clearly. No state can survive without tech alliances.
Tech alliances, that implies you can't go it alone. It's not just about buying foreign hardware off the shelf anymore.
No, it's about embedding technology into the national DNA, into the very structure of governance, and ensuring you have constant dynamic access to the global tech ecosystem.
So let's get specific. Let's look at the catalog of strategic assets. The source details exactly what constitutes this new definition of national power, and this list is incredibly revealing.
It really is, because it merges high-end military tech with what you might think of as boring civilian infrastructure. It confirms that the line between civil and military assets has been intentionally blurred.
Let's break down that list, because according to the source, these are the pillars of modern state power. Where do we start?
We start with the foundation: cloud computing and artificial intelligence, AI. Cloud is the scalable, secure infrastructure you need for everything. Tax collection, military intelligence, public health data. It provides resilience.
And AI is what makes all that data on the cloud useful. We're not talking about AI writing poetry here.
No, we're talking about using AI to run thousands of predictive economic models at once. Stress testing the national budget against a global oil shock or a crop failure. It gives you strategic forecasts faster and more accurately than any team of humans could. AI turns raw data into strategic knowledge.
Okay, so that's the foundation. What's the next layer?
The next layer is protective and defensive, but it's dual purpose. Cybersecurity and digital surveillance capabilities.
Defense and offense, in a way.
You can see it like that. Cybersecurity is the shield, protecting critical infrastructure. Digital surveillance is the intelligence gathering part, monitoring for threats, both external and internal. Both are seen as vital for protecting the state itself.
And here's where the economic focus gets really sharp, really modern: fintech and blockchain technology.
Yes, fintech is about control over the flow of money, the future of national payment systems. The goal is financial resilience, efficiency, and control.
And blockchain specifically, what's the strategic value there?
The source suggests an interest in securing data integrity. Think about creating uncorruptible, decentralized government ledgers for things like land records or government contracts.
Which would be a direct technological assault on internal corruption.
A powerful one. It improves governance efficiency and public trust. But let's go a bit deeper on fintech because it's so important. When the source talks about integrating fintech, a key part of that is planning for a CBDC, a central bank digital currency.
A digital rupee, essentially.
Essentially, yes, a digital form of the national currency, issued and backed by the central bank. By developing this, the state gains direct oversight of digital transactions. It can stabilize currency flows, fight money laundering, and critically reduce its reliance on external payment systems it doesn't control.
So it's about financial sovereignty.
It is financial sovereignty in action.
And the final items on the list? These might be the most telling of all.
I agree. The source calls them the infrastructure of control: satellite data and economic data pipelines.
Satellite data is fairly obvious. Geospatial intelligence for security, but also for economic planning, monitoring, crops, water resources, major infrastructure projects.
Right. But the inclusion of economic data pipelines, we really have to pause on that one. This is a game changer.
This isn't just about collecting GDP stats.
Not at all. It's about controlling the high-velocity flow of high-value information. Trade volumes, industry output, capital flows, energy consumption in real time. Controlling this pipeline is seen as being as strategically vital as controlling your airspace.
That's a powerful analogy. The weight given to fintech and these data pipelines suggests that the real weak point of a modern state is its financial and informational integrity.
It's a soft underbelly.
So if data is the new oil, then controlling the pipelines, who accesses it, how it's secured, where it flows, that becomes a core national security mission.
And that leads us to the unspoken goal behind all of this: the battle for data sovereignty.
The term might not be on every page, but the concept drives this entire section.
Data sovereignty in this context just means a nation's right to govern its own data, to ensure it's stored locally, subject to its own laws, and most importantly, can't be exploited by hostile actors, whether they're other states or corporations.
Which brings us back full circle to the role of Islamabad. The strategic brain in GHQ identifies the need for data control, and the civilian structure provides the legal and regulatory framework to make it happen.
But here's the problem. Achieving this level of technological sophistication, especially for a developing nation, is, well, it's incredibly difficult. You can't just invent a world-class AI sector overnight.
You need external help. You need capability.
You do. And that's where the axis gets its global dimension. This is what brings us to Section 3. Silicon Valley, the invisible partner.
The source uses a really provocative name for this. It calls Silicon Valley Pakistan's unofficial fourth front. We have to analyze that. I mean, how can a tech hub thousands of miles away function as a strategic front, like a geographical border?
Because it functions as a strategic resource reservoir. It's a non-territorial zone of influence. You're not defending land. You're leveraging global human capital and technological momentum. It's statecraft for a globalized world where talent and capital are mobile.
I'm trying to picture the mechanics, though. How does a busy engineer working at a top firm in California actually quietly transfer knowledge back home? I mean, there are surely ethical, if not legal, issues with that.
The source describes it as a layered approach, using both formal and informal channels that lean heavily on cultural and familial ties. It starts with the sheer size and influence of the Pakistani tech diaspora.
The talent pool.
A massive talent pool. Engineers, executives, venture capitalists, researchers, all working at the absolute cutting edge of global tech, mostly in the Bay Area. That diaspora is the bridge.
But it's not just a passive bridge. How is it activated?
It's activated in multiple ways. You have defense tech consultants. These are formal liaisons, people who bring specific national security expertise back through official contracts or advisory roles.
And then there are the financial links.
Critically, fintech investors and venture capital links. This is huge because VC funding doesn't just bring money. It brings an entire ecosystem with it. Best practices, global standards, and access to advanced tech networks that might otherwise be out of reach. The state sees diaspora VC as a strategic injection of both intellectual and financial capital.
And the final two mechanisms are about pure knowledge transfer.
Yes, formal and informal AI research collaboration and cybersecurity advisory links. This implies a systematic effort to keep local researchers and security teams plugged into global developments, often through university partnerships or by having high-level diaspora experts on advisory boards.
But the source uses a very specific phrase that gets to the heart of it. It says that Pakistani engineers power Fortune 500 firms and quietly transfer knowledge back home.
That phrase, quiet knowledge transfer, is the key. It suggests a strategic reliance on this globalized human capital to leapfrog technological gaps. You don't need expensive formal state-to-state military agreements if you can access the knowledge through your own people.
It's a way of turning a potential brain drain into a strategic asset.
Exactly. And you ask what this looks like in practice. Well, a quiet transfer could be a diaspora executive funding a private lab back home that trains local talent in the latest AI techniques. Or it could be an advisory visit where the specific knowledge of how to structure, say, a blockchain payment system is translated into a national model.
It's leveraging patriotism, family ties, professional obligation, all to ensure the latest breakthroughs find their way into the nation's strategic toolkit.
It's an elegant, almost invisible form of external partnership, a very modern form of statecraft.
So now we have the three no's, GHQ, Islamabad, Silicon Valley, and we have the assets they're focused on. Let's move to Section 4, Convergence in Action and Institutionalization. How does this all come together in the real world?
The source argues this convergence isn't just a theory. It's being realized through specific institutions. The phrase used is governance through systems, not slogans.
So creating actual government bodies with specific tech-enabled mandates that carry out the strategic vision.
Precisely. And the list of institutions the source provides really shows the depth of this approach. It touches almost every aspect of a citizen's life and the economy.
Reinforcing that goal of data sovereignty we talked about.
Let's start with the cornerstone. NADRA, the National Database and Registration Authority. The source defines its role as the core of biometric governance.
This is the foundation, the national ID system.
It's the backbone of identity management. It gives the state a secure, digital, verifiable record of its population. Think about the power of that data. It's used for elections, taxes, banking, security operations, everything.
But that level of digitized identity control it's a profound shift in state capacity. The ability to link financial, security, and administrative data for every citizen instantly. It's incredibly efficient, but it also raises huge questions about the centralization of power.
Which the Axis model seems to embrace as a necessary trade-off for resilience.
Sure.
Then you look at the state bank. Its mandate, according to the source, now includes the planning and execution of digital payments and CBDC planning.
We talked about the CBDC. The key here is operational control.
It's the state taking direct control over the future of money, reducing reliance on physical cash, and, more importantly, on foreign payment systems. It's about maximizing financial control to manage things like capital flight and ensure economic plans succeed.
And what about the SIFC, the Special Investment Facilitation Council? That seems like the clearest example of this convergence.
It really is. Its whole purpose is tech-enabled investment facilitation. Its mandate is to slash the red tape for critical strategic investments, often using tech to do it. Digital applications, single-window clearances.
Speeding everything up.
Exactly. It's a direct institutional link between strategic oversight from the military, civilian economic goals, and the tech component that makes it all happen faster than the normal bureaucracy ever could.
The source also mentions cyber commands.
Yes, and with a dual mandate, economic and security intelligence gathering. This confirms that the digital domain is seen as a single, unified intelligence landscape.
Economic stability and national security are two sides of the same coin.
In this model, yes, cyber operations aren't just defensive anymore. They're about strategic information gathering, related to both finance and defense.
And finally, the regulators.
The telecom and IT regulators. Their main job is framed as ensuring data sovereignty. They are the gatekeepers. They make sure the data infrastructure, those pipelines, comply with national laws. They enforce the digital border.
So what's critical to understand is that these aren't just a bunch of separate initiatives.
No, they are synchronized.
Yeah.
And the source gives this synchronized framework a name. It calls it the Asim Munir Doctrine.
Which suggests a formalized, high-level strategic identity for this entire convergence.
And if synchronization is the key concept, the doctrine defines power as alignment, not domination.
Alignment, not domination. What's the difference?
Domination is one institution overwhelming the others. Alignment is about ensuring all nodes of the Axis GHQ, Islamabad, and the Silicon Valley talent are all pulling in the same direction, each using its unique strengths.
So let's break down the features of this alignment.
Okay. First, the strategic direction. GHQ maintains strategic oversight. It sets the big picture priorities and ensures continuity.
But the execution is delegated.
Meticulously. Civilian channels are responsible for execution. This makes sure the technical expertise in the ministries, the state bank, the regulators, is actually used, and it's all done according to legal procedures. That's the functional interface at work.
And it's not just a state-run show.
Far from it. The doctrine emphasizes leveraging private sector technology and integrating diaspora capital and expertise. It's an admission that the state can't innovate as fast as the market, so it has to partner with it.
A state-private partnership model.
A powerful one. And the doctrine also points to specific high-tech applications to reform governance itself. The source mentions blockchain-secured data governance.
We talked about that, using tech to fight corruption and increase trust on things like land records.
Exactly. And the other one is AI-driven intelligence economics.
Which sounds very futuristic. What is it?
It's using AI to forecast economic problems, identify corruption in real time, monitor resource flows, basically turning all that raw data from those economic pipelines into continuous, actionable, strategic knowledge for survival planning.
So the whole doctrine is a formalized partnership model, driven by a central strategic direction, pulling in the best talent wherever it is, all aligned for a single purpose.
That's the core idea. But if you step back and look at this entire, highly centralized structure, you have to confront the big picture implications.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the survival strategy. Criticism versus reality.
The source is very aware of how this looks from the outside. It directly addresses what it calls the criticism.
And that criticism is that this is all just overreach, that the military is extending its influence way too far into civilian areas, and that this could stifle democratic norms, hurt civil liberties, and crowd out the free market.
Which is a natural and, I would say, legitimate concern whenever you see security mandates expand so broadly into civilian life. There's always a risk of mission creep.
That a system designed for a crisis becomes permanent, even in times of stability.
And that could lead to less accountability and a greater concentration of power. That's the core of the counter-argument.
But the source immediately counters that critique. It presents what it frames as the reality of the situation.
And that reality is about crisis management and existential threat. The source argues this integration isn't a choice. It's a necessity for crisis management and ultimately for survival.
It repositions the entire axis. It's not a political preference, it's an existential requirement.
The argument is that the risk of this centralization, while real, is less than the risk of total systemic state failure.
The source grounds this in a lesson from history.
A very stark one. Fragmented states fail, integrated states survive. In this view, when you're facing multiple simultaneous crises, economic, security, digital, letting your state systems operate in isolated, competing silos is a luxury you can't afford. It's an unacceptable strategic risk.
So the formation of the axis is presented as a preventive measure, a structure designed to provide the resilience to get through a high-stress environment without collapsing.
The source concludes that this was a choice for survival through coordinated governance to prevent a potential collapse when civilian systems were seen as weakening under all that pressure.
And this is a really critical takeaway for you, the listener. The source presents the civil-military tech axis not as some ideal political model to be copied, but as a pragmatic, maybe even desperate response to what are perceived as deep, multifaceted existential threats.
It frames it all as structural evolution driven by necessity, not by political ambition.
So that brings us to the end of our deep dive. Let's try to synthesize this. We've traced this fundamental shift in statecraft from a fragmented structure to a single, aligned strategic entity focused on holistic security.
We've identified the three nodes. GHQ as the strategic brain, Islamabad as the functional interface for execution, and Silicon Valley as the invisible fourth front for tech and capital.
The new strategic assets are the ammunition AI, fintech data pipelines. The synchronized institutions like NADRO and the SIFFC are the high-speed delivery systems.
And the Asim Munir doctrine provides the operating manual synchronization for survival.
And the source's final framing is that this structure is not about the militarization of tech, but about the protection of sovereignty in the digital age. It's a response to a world where borders are digital and the most critical assets are intangible data flows.
Which is where it all connects back to you, the listener, for your own final reflection. The source material hammers home this idea that power today is alignment, not domination.
Right.
But to achieve that alignment, the very definition of national security had to be expanded to include pretty much every part of the digital and economic infrastructure.
So if you achieve that strategic alignment, and it provides stability and efficiency, but it comes at the cost of traditional civilian autonomy, what are the long-term societal trade-offs?
When the state is geared for perpetual crisis management, what happens to accountability and individual freedoms when things are, relatively calm? When security is defined so broadly, is there anything left that isn't the matter of national security?
That is the complex, difficult trade-off that this source forces us to confront. It's a question for you to continue to think about as you watch this region and other states around the world grapple with these same hybrid threats.
A really thought-provoking challenge to end on.
It is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into strategic statecraft using the key insights from the Generals of Pakistan by Zahir Ahmad Mir. We really hope this has given you the clarity and the detail you need to get your head around this incredibly complex topic.
Keep exploring the source material and engaging with these ideas. Knowledge is at its most valuable when it helps you analyze these global shifts with a sharper lens.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.